The future of food is uncertain. Rising levels of malnutrition, inequality, and environmental degradation point to the failure of food systems to deliver safe and healthy food for all. While most agree that our food system is in crisis, there are competing interpretations of key problems, solutions, interests, and values.
As a concept, sustainability is now widely used and understood. There is broad agreement about the multidimensional nature of sustainability. It includes the maintenance of a natural resource base, social equity, and the creation of human welfare, though this is often framed in terms of economic means.
There's also a critique around the concept of sustainability, and this critique is what prompted us to develop this exciting new handbook. This handbook brings together a diverse group of scholars to advance bold ideas and reflections around sustainable and regenerative food systems from a social ecological perspective.
The book contains 30 chapters organized around 6 principles. Each chapter includes discussion questions and recommended readings. Contributors to this handbook identify, explain, and analyze what it means to do food pathways sustainably, with an eye towards regeneration. In different ways, the authors open up new avenues for conversation and contemplation. They expose assumptions about the future of food. And in this way, they provide not only a basis for critique, but also for understanding and hope.
From where we stand, we need better concepts and new stories that position us as part of nature, not as sustainers of nature, but as active participants in an integrated cycle of regeneration.
We need examples of processes that enhance the ability of living beings to co-evolve in ways that allow for diversity, complexity, and creativity. We need to find ways to invoke images of participating with the environment in harmony with ecological systems, instead of advancing narratives of sustaining what we have.
So while sustainability in its dominant form is primarily an exercise in efficiency, in this book, we consider regeneration as a fundamental way to rethink and redesign our food-related practices so that they rebuild and contribute to, that is, regenerate, soil fertility, community cohesion, integrated policies, and sustainable diets, to name but a few.
We accept that this concept will certainly be subject to many of the same tensions, challenges, and limitations as the concept of sustainability. However, unlike the verb sustain, which means to support or to cause something to continue, the verb regenerate means to produce or create.
We argue for moving beyond supporting and maintaining towards creating is what's needed to engage in a politics and to afford practices that add to the world.
We therefore conceptualize regeneration as a holistic approach that moves past neutral environmental impact towards the creation of effects for a mutually supportive symbiosis across the food system.
From this approach, the human-nature dualism dissolves, making analytic and practical space for co-creating and co-evolving. It forces an engagement with the production of life and on the ways that these are cultivated. Taken as a whole, these chapters point to a number of key practices and ideas that would appear central to advancing regenerative food systems. We present them here as principles for regenerating food systems, noting that they are not clear-cut principles, but dynamic and cross-cutting.
These principles are not exclusive. There are others to be found and explored. But these are the 6 that came out of the chapters that make up this book.
So the first principle is to acknowledge and include diverse forms of knowing and being in the world. This includes indigenous and traditional ecological knowledge, and an active effort to build on theories and practices of anti-racism, decolonization, feminism, post-capitalism, the co-production of nature and knowledge, and engaged scholarship.
The second principle relates to taking care of people, animals, and the environment. Here we put forward that the regenerative food future must have justice at its core. And in this context, justice is a struggle to reshape realities in ways which allow for people to flourish. Using care ethics can be a tool to analyze agricultural and food practices that aim to reconnect with society and nature.
The third principle calls on us to push past the dominant paradigm of capitalism and related logics when it comes to understanding how people access food. With this principle, we dare people to think and look beyond the constraints of capitalism to uncover the diversity of practices, existing and potential, that contribute to regenerative food systems.
The fourth principle builds on the third one and calls a commoning of the food system. Commoning the food system is about the recognition of food as a non-commodity and as part of a commons. This approach provides a conceptual entry point to engage with not only the status quo, but also with the idea of multiple food systems that are both common and communing.
This takes us to the fifth principle, which is about accountable innovations. When thinking about regenerative food systems, it's clear that innovations are needed. But we need to understand innovations that also include social and social technical innovations. This includes innovations in social practices and organizations, as well as new and improved technological products and processes.
The final principle is the importance of planning. Regenerative food systems require thoughtful, deliberate, and long-term planning. For example, rethinking the rural-urban divide.
So now you know the 6 principles for a social ecological approach to regenerative food systems that emerged from the collection of chapters in this book.
While many of the chapters in this handbook address practices which may be considered a niche, it is important to note that these are not merely alternative food systems. These are systems which foster agro-biosocioeconomic diversity, and in doing so, it addresses many of the key challenges facing food systems like climate change, changing demographics, labor, access to land, soil fertility, displacement, animal welfare, food waste, health, and justice.
But maybe you're asking yourself the same question we repeatedly asked ourselves when we were writing this book. Do we need a new label? There are 2 reasons we came to decide that we did.
First, regenerative is emerging as a new buzzword in the agri-food domain, and it is important for us to get a handle on what it means and how it can be usefully applied. The term regenerative is one that is emerging in some scientific disciplines, spatial design, for example, but also in the sociology of food and agriculture. And we look at it as a step beyond sustainability.
And this led us to the second reason. We identified an opportunity to participate in the shaping of this concept from a social ecological perspective to help move us beyond the limits of sustainability. We see value in this concept insofar as it can challenge the dominant scientific mindset that is busy with input-output level analysis and the depolitical constructions of sustainability.
This handbook moves us beyond the boundaries of sustainability, to focus less on maintaining systems towards practices that build and regenerate ecosystems, communities, and cultures. Regenerative approaches to food systems seek to understand and implement practices that reinstate and regenerate over time.
These approaches take into account not only farming systems, but also farm families, rural communities, landscapes, and regions and ecosystems. They are key to our collective futures.
So if you're interested in this topic, please encourage your library to order a copy of the book. And if you have questions or want to get in touch, reach out. We're always eager to engage with people on this topic.